Commando, the second oldest event tower in TDS, finally got a rework, updating its design, greatly buffing its stats, and giving it a new ability. It's also back as a limited time game pass, costing an expensive 800 robux. In this video, I'll be going over all the stat changes, values, and uses of this tower, then give my personal ranking of how good it is and whether or not you should buy it. So hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get started. Its placement cost increased from 1,600 to 2,250 cash, so it's even more of a mid to late game tower. It now attacks in burst and has a limited amount of ammo. Once the ammo bar has run out, it has to reload, temporarily stopping its attack. Instead of passively shooting missiles, it now has a missile ability which it unlocks at later levels. However, we'll take a closer look at that later. At level 0, its damage tripled from 2 to 6, its range stayed at 12, it now fires in bursts of 3, has 2 pierce, a fire rate of 0.5, burst cooldown of 0.2, reload time of 2.5, 30 max ammo, and its DPS went from 3.94 to 13.02. It may seem like my DPS calculation is a bit off, but TDS has a bug involving the fire rate of towers, so the DPS is a bit less than it should be. The lead balancer gave me a list of the DPS for every level, so it should be right. At level 1, its total cost increased from 1,950 to 3,185 cash, its damage quadrupled from 2 to 8, its range decreased from 14 to 12, it fires in bursts of 3, has 3 pierce, a fire rate of 0.5, burst cooldown of 0.2, reload time of 2.5, 30 max ammo, and its DPS went from 3.94 to 17.37. At level 2, its total cost increased from 2,650 to 6,435 cash, its damage quintupled from 2 to 10, its range decreased from 16 to 13.5, it fires in bursts of 5, has 3 pierce, a fire rate of 0.5, burst cooldown of 0.2, a reload time of 2, 45 max ammo, and its DPS went from 4.11 to 28.25. At level 3, its total cost increased from 4,650 to 14,935 cash, its damage increased from 4 to 15, its range decreased from 17 to 15, it fires in bursts of 6, has 4 pierce, its fire rate decreased from 0.5 to 0.35, it has a burst cooldown of 0.15, a reload time of 1.5, 60 max ammo, and its DPS went from 8.2 to 61.81. At this level, it unlocks the Concussive missile ability, which when activated lets you target a specific part of the track within a much larger blue range. It fires several missiles which lodge themselves into the ground. When enemies walk into them, they explode, dealing splash damage and temporarily stunning them. They have a lifespan of 60 seconds, so you can stack up quite a few, kind of like the Trapper. At this level, each missile deals 125 damage and stuns for 1.25 seconds. This ability recharges differently, with it gaining 1 missile charge every 20 seconds with a max charge of 2. So you can either fire with 1 missile charge or wait 40 seconds and fire 2 at once. We get an extra 6.25 DPS from this ability for a total of 68.4. The missiles can also hit flying, lead, and hidden enemies, despite the Commando itself being able to hit none of these enemies. At level 4, its total cost increased from 12,150 to 34,935, and its damage increased from 10 to 16, its range decreased from 19 to 17, it fires in bursts of 10, has 4 pierce, its fire rate decreased from 0.5 to 0.3, has a burst cooldown of 0.125, a reload time of 1.25, 80 max ammo, and its DPS run from 23.02 to 94.17. The Concussive missile ability is improved, now dealing 175 damage and stunning for 1.75 seconds. The missiles now replenish every 10 seconds, and you can stack up to 4. We get an extra 17.5 DPS from this ability for a total of 111.25 DPS. This is now the final level instead of the tower having 5 levels. And as our final stat, you can place up to 8 commandos. Now, let's take a look at its values and uses to see if this tower is even any good. In terms of single target damage, the level with the best value happens to be level 0, which deals 13.02 DPS for 2,250 cash. That gives it a DPS cost ratio of 5.79, which is pretty good. But remember that it has a pierce of 2 at this level. With proper placement, that can double its DPS up to 26.04, giving it a value of 11.58. That makes this tower really good in the mid game. It's not extremely expensive and can take care of some decently tanky crowds. If we are considering pierce, then level 1 is actually the level with the best value, as it has a pierce of 3 instead of 2. If it's hitting 3 enemies, it has a DPS of 52.11. For a total of 3,185 cash, that's an incredible value of 16.36. For comparison, the Golden Scout only has a value of 9.92. Now, it won't always be hitting this many enemies, but if placed well and set the farthest targeting, you can make it hit the max pierce most of the time. By spamming level 1 commandos in the right spots, you can cook the mid game of Fallen mode, letting you focus a lot more money on farming. As you can see, they kill the crowds and the bosses. But it doesn't just do well in the mid game, it's very powerful against late game crowds when using the combination of its ability and normal attack. Since it has a pierce of 4 at max level, it can get a potential 376.68 DPS for a total of 34,935 cash. That gives it a value of 10.78, and remember, this is without even considering its missiles. If we assume each explosion hits at least 3 enemies in the late game, that gives the ability an added DPS of 52.5. So in total, the level 4 Commando could deal an average of 429.18 DPS, giving it a value of 12.29. This is great value. However, for a crowd control tower, it isn't necessarily insane. But the Commando is a bit of a mix between a single target and crowd control tower. The Pierce allows it to handle crowds, but but it still deals over 100 DPS against singular targets, which isn't bad at all. With 8 max commandos, you can deal up to 3,433.44 DPS against crowds, or 890 single target DPS. This is fantastic extra damage, making it a great option in the late game. Overall, I say it's primarily a crowd control tower, so you'll want to bring another form of high single target DPS. Also, keep in mind, we are kind of assuming the best case scenario. You're gonna have to place this tower in good positions with good targeting, or it won't deal nearly this much damage against crowds. So it's kind of a skilled tower to use. Sometimes it can be a good idea to stack up rockets on the track during easy waves, as a despawn time of 60 lets you place up to 10 rockets at max level. At max level, that's 1,750 damage, or 5,250 if you're assuming they hit at least 3 enemies, which can come in clutch if you're facing a bigger wave. With 8 commandos, you can get up to 80 rockets placed for a whopping 14,000 damage, or 42,000 damage if you're assuming they hit 3 enemies. This sounds insane, but remember, you're sacrificing the DPS you would get from normally just attacking the enemies. But it can be a good idea if you know a harder wave is coming up. There's one more thing regarding the missiles that we've kind of ignored so far, and that's the 1.75 second stun time at max level. Being able to stun crowds of enemies for 1.75 seconds is very helpful and makes the commando a pretty solid stalling option. After being stunned, enemies cannot be restunned for another 3.5 seconds, so make sure you're not just attacking the same enemies over and over. Despite the commando having bad coverage, not being able to detect anything, the missiles can hit any kind of enemy, and since you are able to spam rockets if you have 8 commandos, its coverage isn't necessarily terrible. I say the only real issue with this tower is the fact that it needs good placement, and since some maps don't have good spots, it's a bit map dependent. But overall, this tower is a fantastic option against mid and late game crowds, pretty good against decent health bosses, and has great value. It also provides good stalling, making it a very versatile tower. However, it requires really good placement, and I'd still say the mortar is a better crowd control tower. But because of its unique advantages and versatility, I'm gonna rank it as a high A tier. In terms of whether or not you should buy it, I honestly think it's pretty expensive. If you want a strong crowd control tower that can also stun enemies, just use the electroshocker, which I would say is still better than the commando. But it's a good tower, so if you don't care about spending money, go for it. Anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you're gonna buy this tower and whether or not you agree with my ranking. And if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join the Blue Head Mafia. Also, if you want to talk to me, consider checking out my Discord. We got some pretty cool features, like a custom party finder bot that will automatically pair you up with other people who are trying to do the same strategy. There's a link to the server pinned in the comments. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to these channel members for supporting my content. If you want to add me as a friend on Roblox or get early access to some of my videos, consider becoming a channel member. It helps me out a lot and I really appreciate it. Anyways, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.